We'd all save a lot of energy if who we seemed to be matched who we really were. In other words, no images to maintain. Most people worry about how they're perceived, so they'll smile on the outside while crying on the inside. Their lives are often an act for the benefit of others. We can lose the game face, because in the final analysis, God is in charge of our reputations. To learn more, stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Turn with us to Acts chapter 5. Erwin Lutzer comes now to teach us that when God is first, He owns our reputations.
Many years ago, I went into a county fair and walked into a house of mirrors. I don't know if you've ever done that, but when I was there, you walked into one room and you looked at the mirror and you were very tall and exceedingly skinny. And then you went into another room where there was a mirror that made you very, very short and exceedingly rotund. And all the other mirrors did something in between. Every one of them distorted who you were. When you stop to think of it, we actually live in a house of mirrors. The whole world is a house of mirrors. And what most of us want to do is to find a mirror that makes us look good. What we want to do is to look good to others. And we want others to see us the way we want them to see us. Nothing more, nothing less. And so who we are inside and who we are on the outside oftentimes is two different people. It's interesting that in the book of Acts, when revival was breaking out in the early chapters, Satan tried to stifle the work by making sure that the church received pressure from without. They were persecuted. But when you get to chapter 5, you discover that he begins to change his tactics. From now, it is not outside influence, it is inside. What he wants to do is to use a couple in the church, a married couple, and he wants to use that couple to destroy the church. The text, of course, is the 5th chapter of Acts, though we shall begin just a verse or two before that in chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 36 is really a part of the story. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. Now a man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but bought the rest and put it at the feet of the apostles. They didn't lie verbally. They gave the impression that they were giving all of the money, when in point of fact they were giving only part of it. Here was Barnabas, who sold this land, and he brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. And one day Ananias and Sapphira were having a discussion, and they said to one another, it'd be good if we do that too, because maybe, who knows, Ananias, if people see you do that, you might become a deacon in the church. And Sapphira, you might be put in charge of women's ministries. So let's pretend that we're as spiritual as Barnabas. Now, it's interesting that as we think about this story, a couple of words by way of introduction. First, it is a sin that was instigated by Satan. Instigated by Satan. Because I'm sure you do know the rest of the story. It says, verse 3, Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? In other words, you didn't have to give anything if you didn't want to give. This is totally voluntary. What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied to men, but to God. Why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit? I'm going to say something now that could be life-transforming in your walk with God. I hope many of the things that I say could be life-transforming. What Satan does is he puts ideas in our minds that we think are our own, so we're not afraid of those ideas. And the thought of sinning and the decision to sin is not fearful to us because we think it's our decision. Could you imagine what would have happened if Satan would have appeared at their breakfast table one time in all of his fury and all of his horror and said, "I have an idea for you. Lie about your giving pattern." They'd have been terrified. But because he's invisible and because he puts the ideas in our minds that go along with our pride, we think that it is okay, and so we choose to sin, and we think I'm sinning because I want to sin. And that's part of the story. The other part is it was instigated by Satan, who puts ideas in our minds to sin. How did Satan want to use this couple? Well, imagine if they had been exalted in the church. Furthermore, word would have gotten out that this is what happened. And you know what? They went on to leadership within the church. And so people would have begun to think to themselves, it's okay to be a hypocrite. And they may have even thought it is okay to sin. Because after all, isn't this an era of grace? Isn't this the era in which Jesus bore God's wrath? So we don't have to have any fear of sinning. And that, like leaven, would have permeated the whole church, and if not checked, could have destroyed it. It was a sin instigated by Satan. Could I say also that it was motivated by pride? Of course. Because they wanted to be thought of better than they really were. They wanted to keep this hidden agreement within their own hearts. And they wanted to project this aura of spirituality and commitment. And they wanted to make sure that everyone not only saw what they gave, but to make sure also that they were honored for it. And they lied to pull it off. What I'd like to do is to use their story to introduce us to 3 more laws of stewardship. Now, if you were with us last time, you know I gave you 5 laws of biblical stewardship. I encourage you to find that message, tape, CD, whatever, because this is